You know that feeling? You're in a meeting, someone's clicking through slides filled with jargon and charts so complex they look like a wiring diagram, and you just nod along. You think, wow, this must be brilliant, because you barely understand a word of it. Yeah, we've all been there. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on our weird and often totally backwards relationship with complexity.
So let's just get right into it. Why? Why do our brains have this automatic reflex that connects complicated with intelligent? What is that little mental shortcut that makes us see a tangled mess and think, genius at work?
Well, the simple truth is, complexity feels impressive. It really does. If you're the one explaining the complicated thing, it makes you look like you've put in a ton of work. It signals status. And if you're in the audience, it feels like you're part of something important. It's kind of like this intellectual theater, where looking smart can sometimes feel more important than actually being clear.
And what's really wild is that this is not a new problem. This isn't about our modern tech-filled lives. Confucius was talking about this very same human habit over 2,000 years ago. It seems like we're just hardwired to build these elaborate mazes around really simple ideas.
So this leads us right into our first big idea, which we're calling the prison of smart. This is where we look at the real downsides of our obsession with making things complicated.
Believe it or not, there's a technical name for this. It's called complexity bias. It's this little glitch in our mental software that, when we're faced with two choices, makes us instinctively trust the more complicated one. We just wave away the simple solution, thinking, that's too easy, that'll never work. We're convinced that a really tough problem has to have a ridiculously tough answer. I mean, just look at the whole cult of the perfect morning routine. It's the perfect example, right? We build these insane 6-step systems that are almost impossible to actually do every day. And then when we inevitably fail, who do we blame? We blame ourselves, not the ridiculously complex system we set up. All of a sudden, just waking up and having a cup of coffee feels like you're not even trying.
But here's the thing you have to remember. This isn't some personal flaw. It's baked into our DNA. Our brains are these incredible pattern-seeking machines. They're so good at it, in fact, that they often see these beautiful, intricate patterns where, in reality, there's nothing but random noise.
There's this classic experiment by B.F. Skinner that shows this perfectly. He put some hungry pigeons in a box that would drop food at totally random times. Pretty soon, the pigeons started doing these weird little dances, turning in a circle, tapping a corner, because they were convinced that their actions were making the food appear. They invented a whole complicated system to explain something that was pure chance. Sound familiar? And here's the great paradox in all of this. We think that dealing with complexity is the hard work, but a lot of the time, it's actually an escape. It's a cognitive shortcut. By calling something really complex, we give ourselves permission to check out. We get to surrender, to stop doing the truly hard work of digging down to find the simple truth.
Okay, so if complexity is a trap, what's the escape hatch? That brings us right to our next section, the power of simple.
So, where do we look for answers? Well, let's turn to some of the smartest people who ever lived. First up, the physicist Richard Feynman. For him, the ultimate test of knowledge wasn't about using big, fancy words. It was the total opposite. He believed if you truly understood something, you could explain it so simply that almost anyone could get it. Simplicity wasn't dumbing things down. It was the ultimate sign of mastery. Then you've got Albert Einstein, who is famous for a similar idea. But what's so great about this is the irony. Einstein's actual original quote on this was, well, way more complex. He said something like, "The supreme goal of all theory is to make the irreducible basic elements as simple and as few as possible without having to surrender the adequate representation of a single datum of experience. The simple version we all know and love is actually proof that its own principle works." And of course, you can't have this conversation without mentioning Steve Jobs. He built a global empire on this one idea. This phrase, from Apple's very first brochure, completely changed the game. It reframed simplicity. It wasn't about being lazy or basic. It was the highest, most elegant thing you could possibly aim for. Okay, this all sounds really good in theory, right? But how do we actually fight this bias in our own heads, day to day? That brings us to our next part, the sharpest tool.
The most powerful weapon we have is a mental model from way back in the 14th century. It's called Occam's razor, and the idea itself is beautifully simple. If you have a bunch of different explanations for something, the one with the fewest ifs, ands, or buts is probably the right one. It's a tool for cutting away all the fluff.
The best way to remember this is an old saying they teach to medical students. When you hear hoofbeats, think of horses, not zebras.
See, our complexity bias makes us hunt for zebras everywhere. The wild conspiracy theory, the super rare disease, the elaborate plot. Occam's razor is just that quiet voice of reason reminding you, hey, maybe just check for the horse first. Because 9 times out of 10, it's a horse.
All right, let's pull all these threads together in our final section, the ultimate sophistication.
Think about any big creative project you've ever worked on. There's a general rule that about 90% of the real, essential work is pretty straightforward. That's the horse. But it's that last 10%, the edge cases, the endless what-ifs, that's where we get completely stuck in a swamp of complexity. We get obsessed with finding that one zebra, and we forget about the whole herd of horses standing right in front of us.
And this gets to the most important point of all. Simplicity is not easy. It is incredibly hard work. Like Steve Jobs said, you don't just start there. You have to earn it. It demands that you wrestle with the entire, messy, complicated reality of a problem until you understand it to its very core. Only then, after you've gone deep, do you have the right to start stripping things away.
And that really is the heart of it. Simplicity isn't ignorance. It's the beautiful, hard-won prize you get on the other side of understanding. It's not the starting line, it's the finish line. It's the proof that you've done the difficult, sometimes painful work of wrestling with a problem, of learning, of struggling, and finally, of truly getting it. So I want to leave you with a question. Just take a look at your life, your work, your goals, your daily routines. What is one complicated thing, one zebra, that you can strip back to its simple, powerful, essential horse? What's one thing you can make simpler, starting today?